In this video, I'm going to teach you everything that you need to know about persisting your data to local storage in a React application. I'm going to show you a very simple yet very efficient way to handle all of this, and also as a bonus at the end of the video, I'm also going to show you how to take all of this and package it into a custom hook that you can directly use in any component that you want to have persisted functionality. Now, before we get into that, there's two things that I want to mention that are really important. The first one is that if you didn't know, I also have a course. It's called Project React, and we actually learn about local storage in the course, but we do it in much more detail. And I also show you how to take local storage as one of the small pieces in many other pieces of what it takes to build an actual real complex project with React. In the course, you learn everything that is required to actually build such a project. You learn about navigation, state, forms, fetching data, and so much more. And it's also super beginner friendly. If you're interested, I highly recommend it. I'm actually in the middle of working on the extended version, which has more content, more modules, more tutorials. And if you get the course now, you're actually going to get the update completely for free when it comes out. So honestly, now is the best time to get it. I'll leave a link in the description. It's called Project React. And once again, I highly recommend it. And also the second thing is I also have a newsletter. It's completely free. It's called Import React. I love the name. It's of course all about React. You get tips, tutorials, tricks delivered to your inbox completely for free every single week. I'll also going to leave a link in the description for that if you're interested. Now let's get into the video. All right, cool. So let's begin. So over here, I have a very simple application. We have one component and we have this count variable over here, which is a state variable. It gets its initial value as 0. And then we're just displaying the initial value over here in an h1 tag. And then we also have a button over here to increment it where we're calling the setCount function with count plus 1. Super simple, nothing fancy here. This is what the application currently looks like. We have our count over here. We have the increment button. I can click the increment button. It is going to increment the count. And this is a super simple bare bones count application that we're going to use as our starting point to actually add local storage and persistence support to this. Now, when you're thinking about persisting state, right, first of all, it helps to understand why you would want to persist state in the first place, or even where should you actually persist state in a React application. So let's take, for example, let's imagine for a second that this wasn't actually a count, but actually that this represented the amount of items in your cart. And this button over here, instead of being the increment button, would actually add a product to your cart. Let's assume that that is the case. Well, the way that we have it right now, as soon as I refresh the page over here, our count, the amount of items in our cart, is actually gone. We lost all that information. To get it back, we have to re-add items to the cart. Again, we press this increment button over and over again. That's inefficient because ideally we will want to store this value somewhere in the local storage persisted so that when we refresh the page, we can actually get this value back and we can inject it directly in our state, and then we can still change it. That's also very important. So that's a very common and realistic use case for using something like local storage. It's state that doesn't need to be stored in the database necessarily. It's not that important. It's state that can also be cleared if the user uses a different browser. It's not user specific per se, and it's generally state like that you want to persist in local storage as opposed to storing it in the database because it's faster, you're not calling any backend, and everything is stored locally on the browser. So now we're going to implement this in a really simple but very efficient way. So going back to the code over here, what we ideally want to do is we want this count variable to first of all still be state. We still want this to be state in our actual application, in our component. We want to be able to change this with the button over here, but we want two things. We want first of all to try to get this value from the local storage initially on mount instead of initializing this to 0 if the value is available, which means if it's been stored previously in local storage. And second of all, every time that this value changes, we also want to sync those updates with the local storage so that we're persisting the latest value of the count, right? The latest updated value, so that then the next time that we refresh the page or reload the component, we can get that value directly from the local storage and pick up exactly where we left off. So to do all of that, we're going to have to create some code that lives outside of any React component. That is going to be the code that actually works with local storage. And then we're going to integrate that into a React component. And as I said, as a bonus at the end of the video, I'm also going to show you how to take all of this into a custom hook to make it super easy and super reusable to use across the entire application. So let's first start with all of the local storage stuff. So I'm going to come in here inside of the src folder, and here I'm going to make another folder called utils. And this is generally something that you want to do in your application. This is a folder for any sort of utility, any sort of small piece of code that is reused and shared across the application, which our local storage utils are going to be one of them. So we're going to make a new file inside of here, and we're going to call this one localStorage.ts like this. And in here, we're going to be creating and exporting two different functions. One function to set an item in the local storage and one function to get an item from the local storage. So first, let's start with the set item. So we're going to do export function set item. This is going to take in a key, which is going to be the key that we actually want. That is going to be of type string. If you're not using JavaScript, if you're not using TypeScript, sorry, that's totally fine. Don't worry about it. Just ignore the types. But if you are, it's fine. Just follow along. As the value, this is going to be of type unknown, because really we don't know what kind of value we can expect here, nor do we really care. All that we're doing is we're taking this value and just storing it directly in the local storage. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do a try catch block. And the reason we're going to do that, so we're going to do try like this, and then we're going to do catch like this. The reason we're going to do that is because in the local storage, it can actually throw errors. For example, if there's no space in the local storage, if it's full, because it does have a finite amount of storage that it can have, it will actually throw an error if there's no space. So we actually need to handle those errors. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do window.localStorage. We're going to access directly the local storage object on the window .set item, and we're going to pass it here the key, and we're going to do JSON.stringify, and we're going to pass in the value like this. The reason we're doing JSON.stringify is because you can only put strings inside of the local storage, and so any value that we have has to be stringified into JSON to be able to be stored in local storage. And then for the error, we're not really going to do anything because honestly these errors are not that common, but we still need to handle them. So we're just going to console.log, and we're going to do here error. We're going to console log the error just so that we at least know and have something in our console that tells us that something went wrong when trying to set an item in the local storage. And then we're going to do the same thing over here for the function to get an item from local storage. So again, we're going to do export function get item from local storage. We're going to have to pass this here a key as well. That is going to be of type string, and that is going to take no other arguments because we're not setting any value in the local storage. We're just returning a value directly from the local storage. And then just like we did above, we're also going to do a try catch block for the same reasons as above. This can also throw an error. Then we're going to do here const item equals window.localStorage.get item, and we're going to pass it here the key. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do return, and then if we have an item, because again, we might not have an item, this item might have never been set in local storage initially. So if we have an item, we're going to return the json.parse, and we're going to return item like this. Otherwise, we're going to return undefined like this. And then finally, we're going to do catch, and then we're going to catch the error, and we're going to do here console.log error, just like we did error like this, just like we did in the previous example. So now we have two functions, set item and get item. We're exporting both of these functions, and this is what we're going to use to interact directly with the local storage. Now, you may be wondering, why did we actually create functions and export them in the first place? Why didn't we just access the window.localStorage directly in this component over here? Well, we could have done that. There's nothing really stopping us from doing that, but we actually have to handle this error case. Even though it isn't common, we still have to handle it because it can throw an error. And it's always better to create a reusable function and then use that function instead that actually handles this, because otherwise we would have had to put try catch in both of these functions in this component, and that would have made a lot of code and would have littered this component. Instead, you put it in its own file as a utils file, you export the function, and you just use the function, and you're still getting the protection of actually catching any errors if there's any. This is a better way, and generally that's what I try to teach in my videos and also in my course Project React. So now that we have this, what we can do is we can come back here to our actual application, and now over here in this useState variable, instead of actually defaulting this value to 0, we're going to try to get this from the local storage first instead, and if there's a value, we're going to return it. Otherwise, we're going to return this same 0 value to be used as the initial value. So we're going to remove the 0. We're going to pass here a function to useState because we can do a function in useState. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do const item equals get item. We're going to import the function from our utils. And here we're going to pass the key, which is going to be our count. We're going to keep things simple. That is going to be our count that is potentially in the local storage or potentially not. And then we're going to do return item, or we're going to return 0 as the initial value. And now the only thing that we need to do is, because we are working in TypeScript, we're just going to typecast this as a number, because again, local storage cannot really know what actual value is here inside of this item over here. It just knows that it's a string, because remember, we actually parsed it over here. We took a string and we parsed it, and we actually don't have the type of it. So we have to actually manually cast this as a number to tell our count over here that is going to be a number in any case, if we have the value from local storage or if we just default it initially to 0. So now our count over here is still the same count value. It's still working as state. It can still be changed just like before, but now we're initializing it. We're trying to get it from the actual local storage first. And if it's there, we're just returning that. Otherwise, we're returning the actual value over here. That's how this works. Now, if I go here to the application and actually refresh or even increment the application, if I refresh, we're still losing the count because we currently haven't set any value in the local storage. We're not setting it as it changes. It's changing here locally in the component, but we're not reflecting those changes in the local storage. So now we have to do that. So to do that, we're going to come here and we're going to make use of the standard use effect hook in React, which is a perfect solution for our problem over here. So we're going to do use effect. We're going to import this from React. Why is this not working? Let me see. Add import from React. There we go. We're going to pass this here a function, and we're going to pass here an empty dependency array. Inside of the dependency array, we're going to pass the count over here because we want this effect to run every single time that the count changes. And then inside of here, the only thing that we have to do is every time that the count changes, we just have to set the value inside of the local storage using the set item function that we just created. So we can do set item. We can import the function from local storage. We can pass it here count as our key, and we can pass it here the actual value, which is going to be count. And there you go. Now we have an effect. It's running every single time that the count changes. It's setting it in the local storage. And then we're going to be able to, once we refresh the page, actually access that value in this function over here and return it as our state variable. So let's go ahead. Let's try this. Let's come here to our actual application. Let's reload. Now we're going to increment the count and we're going to refresh, and you're going to see that the count is still stored and it's still being put here as we refresh. I can still increment this. This is still state, right? I can still do that. And then I refresh and our count is still getting pulled from the local storage. If I open up here the console, make this a little bit bigger for you, and then we go here to application, we go here to local storage inside of localhost, you're going to see that we have our value over here. Where can I see it? There we go. We have our count, and this is actually a value of 10. As I change this, you're going to see that the value is being incremented in the local storage. And then every single time that I reload, that is the value that is getting pulled from this function over here, this get item, and it's getting returned as a state, which then takes it from the local storage, but still allows us to actually change it as state inside of our React component. And honestly, that's really it in terms of our functionality. We have a function to get the item from local storage, put it in state, initialize it correctly. And then we also have functionality to actually sync that value every time that it changes with the local storage. So in terms of functionality, this is pretty complete. Of course, you could extend this. You could also come here and you can add a remove item function, which I haven't done and I won't do in this video to just keep things simple, but you could easily extend this and you can add your own functionality. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a really neat and efficient way to put all of this into a custom hook to just literally have one line that is going to do all of this for us in any React component that we want. So we're going to come here to our sidebar and I'm going to make another folder inside of the src folder, and this one we're going to call hooks. This is again a really nice pattern to do. Put all of your hooks inside of your application inside of the hooks folder to make it really easy to be organized. Inside of here, we're going to create a new hook, and this one we're going to call usePersistedState.ts. This is going to be a hook that allows us to work with useState and just automatically have it persisted. So we're going to come here and we're going to do export function usePersistedState, and this function is going to have the following. So as the first argument, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do a key over here that is going to be of type string. And then we're going to take this here, an initial value. So we're going to do initial value. And this one is going to need a type. And for this, I'm going to use a type generic in TypeScript. So I'm going to come here at the beginning of this function and I'm going to do t like this. Instead of using unknown like we had here, right? We had unknown where we actually didn't care about the value, or we didn't really know or care about the value at all. In this case, we're not going to know about the value, but we will care because this type is the type that is going to get returned from this actual hook and is going to be useful to automatically get type inference, as we're using this inside of this component. It is going to make sense in just a moment, trust me. So then the initial value is going to get this type t. right? So whatever type the initial value is, that's the type that everything is going to be. So if we're using usePersistedState with a number, everything is going to be a number. If it's a string, everything is going to be a string, and so on. Then what we're going to do is we're literally going to come here, and we can even close this local storage. We're going to take all of this code over here and put it directly in the custom hook, because essentially we're going to be recreating the same functionality. So we're going to come here and import useState. We're going to import our getItem function. We're going to import our useEffect, and we're going to import our setItem function. Now, instead of hard coding the actual count everywhere, we're going to pass the key that we have here. So we can just take our count over here and just pass the key directly. That is a string, so it is going to work. Then we're also going to want to change this count variable over here to just put value instead. I think it's just a little bit clearer, because again, this isn't necessarily going to be count. It can be any arbitrary value. And then over here, as the return function, we're either going to return the item, and here instead of hard coding it as a number, we're going to do as t. Right? So again, whatever t was, that is what the item is going to get returned as. And then instead of the 0, we're going to pass our initial value over here so that we return that instead. And finally, because we actually want to use this value from the hook and actually use it as a normal component, as a normal hook, sorry, we're going to come here and we're going to return, and we're going to return here value and then set value, which is exactly what useState returns. And just this is a little TypeScript trick to get automatic your types and everything. We're going to do it as const like this, because this is going to be a fixed array of only 2 elements, and the first one is always going to be the value, and the second one is always going to be the setter function of the state. And that's it. With this, we took all of our functionality and we put it in a custom hook. So again, this takes in a key over here, an initial value. The initial value is of type t. We don't know exactly what t is, but we just know that that is going to be what we return, the same value of t. Then we'll run the same code over here that just tries to get the item from local storage first. If it is, it returns it as t. Otherwise, it just returns the initial value, which is also of type t, so everything is going to work. Then every time the value changes, we just update it in the local storage. And finally, we return everything as a constant, as a fixed array, to be able to be used inside of our component. And then to use it, all that we have to do is get rid of this useEffect. It's no longer going to be needed. Get rid of everything over here, and we're just going to put usePersistedState, and we're going to pass it here the key. We're going to do count like this, and the value, the initial value, we're just going to pass 0, and there we go. We can get rid of our imports here at the top, and now we have a custom hook that we created. We can use this anywhere in our component, anywhere in any component that we want to have persisted state. We pass it here a key, we pass it here an initial value, and if I hover over the count over here, you're going to see that it's type number, because this type is getting inferred from this 0 over here. That's how type generics work in TypeScript. We know that initial value is going to be of type t, so then the item, whatever we return from the local storage, must also be of the same type of type t, which is why we get number over here. And then we have our setter function, which works exactly in the same way as if we were using useState. So now let's open up the browser and let's test this out. So going back here to the browser, we can actually refresh, and we're going to see that we still have the same functionality. We still have 15 in our local storage. I can still increment this just like that, and it still works. It's perfect. If I come here and I actually delete this from the local storage and then just refresh, now we have no value in the local storage. So it's getting initialized to a value of 0, and we can start all over again. And we can just increment this, and we can reload, and we still have the same value coming from the local storage. This works, and this works exactly as we expected. And there you go, guys. With literally just a couple of lines of code, we have a custom hook that we created, and we have persisted functionality that works super efficiently. And also remember, we're still handling the errors correctly. So this is actually never going to break in a way that we don't expect. If something breaks, we'll get a log, and we can actually handle it if we wanted to. And we've integrated this super nicely in a custom hook to bring this into the React world. And now we have all of this functionality in one line of code that we can put in this component, and we can put in virtually any other component that we want in our application. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos just like this one, make sure to leave this video a big thumbs up. You can also click here to subscribe, or you can click here to watch a different video of mine that YouTube seems to think that you're really going to enjoy. And with that being said, my name has been Darius Causin. This is Causin Solutions. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.